I'm Stanley Leong with Chu Wei-Lin, and this is CNA938. Thank you for joining us today. We are less than a month away to when the Summer Olympics in Tokyo begins, 29 days to be exact. Most certainly, the competing athletes are physically conditioning themselves to be at their peak come July. But beyond strength training and speed, there's a lot happening up there in the head as well to get them mentally tough and focused on what's ahead. And that head bit, well, you can call it sports psychology, which is what we'll be discussing today.
Let's learn how we can apply some of the principles of sports psychology into everyday life, especially since most of us aren't professional or competitive athletes. Our guest is Edgar Tham, Singapore's pioneer sport and performance psychologist. He was employed by the Singapore government as its very first local sports psychologist in 1995. And a year later, he was the founding head of the sports psychology unit of the Singapore Sports Council.
Fast forward to today, Edgar is a full-time sport and performance psychologist in private practice at Sports Psych Consulting, where he is chief sport and performance psychologist. And he's been team consultant and a traveling psychologist to numerous national teams that had prepared for major sporting events like the SEA Games, Asian Games, Commonwealth Games, and also, of course, the Olympics. Edgar, good to have you back on CNA 938. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Now, Edgar, we want to first get a good understanding about sports psychology. What are the fundamental principles of sports psych, and what areas do you focus on?
We focus basically on helping athletes to manage the stress of competition and also supporting the people who help them. For example, their coaches, their team managers, and of course their families and friends who support them in their strive for wanting to excel in their sport. So it's about helping them manage the stress responses when it comes to high-level competitions. And I remember in the old days when we first started, sports psychology was like a bit of a taboo subject. But today it's highly accepted and a lot of athletes are using it as a way for them to excel and do better.
What made it a taboo subject back in the day?
Why was it a taboo?
Yeah.
Well, I guess when you use the word psychologist or psychology, it was something that people would have, an association where this person has a mental problem or mental illness. But we have been educating people for close to 25 years, since 1995, of course. So that's where I think people are beginning to see that there's a difference. Our focus is not on the clinical issues, although we may refer out to a clinician, but our focus is on helping them utilize the powers within that they have and then use that as part of their mental preparation to bring out the best in themselves.
How did you first develop an interest in this area of psychology? Were you very active in sports yourself?
Yes, I was. I want to thank my parents for that. I was exposed to many sports. I did Aikido, and that's where I also learned a lot about being calm under pressure. I also did Taekwondo, and later on, I went on to do kayaking, sprint racing, kayaking, and dragon boat racing, one of my favorite sports. And that's where I learned to apply that, and I realized, hey, wait a minute, there's something interesting here. And in my personal experience, I actually, what I call peak performed. I was in the zone. It was like in a dragon boat race. Ever tried dragon boat racing?
Yeah, kind of. Yes, I have.
It's really high intensity and really tiring. And I remember in that particular race in 1990, my team and I won the men's open. But more importantly, we were in the zone. It was effortless. And I attribute part of that to the mental preparation that the team and I did during our training for almost a year plus in preparation for that important race. And that changed my mind about the psychology of performance. And that's how it got started.
Right. Well, I've been in the zone before. I mean, when I play like tennis, for instance, but I get out of the zone very easily. So I guess I need to stay longer in that zone. I probably would get some techniques from you in just a while. But, when we talk about sports psychology, how does it differ from general psychology?
Sports psychology came from, general psychology. A lot of the principles come from there. It is the contextual application of general psychology principles in the sporting context. However, the interesting thing is that what we're beginning to realize is that sports psychology can be applied beyond sport. And that's the amazing part. A lot of the principles in sport can actually be used in life.
Tell us more about these principles of sports psychology and how we can harness them in our lives and in business.
One of the things that we realize that in sport competition, for example, the limelight is on you. The whole world's watching you. You got millions of people watching you on YouTube Live or on the internet, and of course within the stadium itself. So there's a lot of pressure and stress to be able to function at your best and win a medal, for example, for that particular athlete. Every athlete wants to win a medal. So in that sense, a lot of times athletes, may crumble under that pressure or stress. So the key here is to apply the principles of composure, the ability to stay calm, the ability to stay focused on task and not be distracted by the crowds or the jeering or cheering, whatever, out there. And also having confidence. In fact, confidence is one of the most important qualities of mentally tough athletes that we're seeing in the research. And of course, the ability to cope with mistakes, setbacks, unforced errors, disappointments, and even temporary failure on the part of the athlete or the teams that they play for or with. And last but not least, the ability to work as a team player. I call it the 5 C's, actually. A simple way for people to remember. And this applies in the corporations because we've done training in this area. So C1, composure, C2, concentration, C3, confidence, C4, what we call copeability, the ability to cope with mistakes, setbacks, and disappointments, dealing with adversity. And then lastly, cohesion, the 5 C's. No, not your cash, car, credit card, condo, and whatever not that Singaporeans are typically well known for in wanting to achieve success in life. But yeah.
Now, we also want to talk about, winning mindset. And that's something we hear quite a bit of when we talk about, sports and sporting champions and the kind of mindsets they go into the games and competitions with. Winning mindset, it seems to place a great pressure on athletes to be able to meet the goals that they've set or the targets that they want to attain. Even the word set in the word mindset suggests it can be rather rigid because of that huge expectation on the sports person's shoulders. So how fixated should we be, whether we're sports people or not, in achieving our targets, and how does it then leave room for us to accept the end result if it's lesser than what we wanted it to be?
I guess you're talking a little bit about goal setting. When we look at Olympians and world champion athletes, they always have this big dream and goal they want to accomplish. So winning a medal or position or ranking, that's important for them. So you could say that's the fixation on that. But the beauty of it is that they have to learn to adapt. Athletes are trained by their coaches, obviously, to be able to adapt to the changing conditions. And so they have to, we use the word pivot, like in basketball, you have to pivot. When in certain direction you're moving into isn't working, you got to turn and move away from your opponent. So athletes learned that goal setting has to be flexible to suit the situation. For example, a good example is athletes, I would say 90% of the time may get injured, but the key here is that during that injury downtime, they have to find a way to deal with their inability to perform. Right. Likewise, businesses, right now the pandemic has caused a lot of people to, lose faith in themselves, for example, and they've forgotten to be flexible and pivot. For example, going online is a mindset that I think some businesses are slow to adopt.
This is Money Mind on CNA938, and we're hearing from Edgar Tham, who is Singapore's pioneer sport and performance psychologist. He's been talking to us about sports psychology and how some of the principles can be used in our everyday lives. Now, Edgar, you talked about how athletes need to cope with having the limelight on them. Let's talk about one athlete who's been struggling with that. She is 4-time Grand Slam winner, Naomi Osaka, the women's world number 2 tennis player. Now, you probably remember that she withdrew from the French Open earlier this year because she refused to attend press conferences. She said, she's an introvert. It makes her depressed and anxious. What do you make of this strategy of hers to withdraw?
I think it was a smart move on her part, although some people may not see it as so, or they were a little bit miffed with her. I think the key was that she was sensitive to her own needs, and she was able to stand up to her own situation, and she was aware. Yes, I know Serena Williams has got a slightly different view of that same perspective. She has this mindset that I know more of tennis than you do, I guess she was referring to the people who were interviewing her and kind of like asking her really tough questions. But I guess it's also about that personality, and therefore people like Naomi Osaka would probably be a little bit more at risk, inverted commas. I wouldn't want to use it too strongly, but I guess for a better word. And I also feel that she was being brave in doing that because there was some backlash on her behavior or action.
But at the same time, if you are performing, in sport at that kind of level, a very high level, you would expect that it just come, as a package deal, the limelight, the fame, the media attention, public attention. Would you say that showed a lack of mental toughness in some sense on Naomi's part?
Now, that's a tricky question, I have to admit. But I think if I were to ask another question back at you, just from a metaphorical standpoint, okay, if I may, you guys have graduated from university, yes?
Presumably, yes. I never checked my co-host qualifications.
Presumably.
I assume you guys have graduated from university. Yes, now let me ask you this. Did you do well in every subject?
Oh no, statistics was a killer for me. I can't do numbers.
Yes, but you graduated and you are now a very successful, or both of you are successful radio hosts.
We hope.
That's
we wish
debatable.
To think so, yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes. And congratulations for a job well done and a great program you have online. But the point I'm saying is this. Every athlete is a package deal. So they're not perfect. I think sometimes we just are too narrow focused on certain weaknesses of people. In fact, when she announced her withdrawal, there were other world-class athletes who respected that and in fact endorsed what she did. So it's quite interesting. And also don't forget, people like Michael Phelps, 23 gold medals at the Olympics, and he suffered anxiety, depression because of the pressure. So are you saying he was not successful? So I guess my point to the audience and to you, to everyone here listening, is that it's a package deal. It doesn't mean that when they talk about I can't deal with the media means that they're no good. It's just a part of the human beingness or the being a human, right? That they're not perfect and they're working on that, I guess. And I also admit we don't train our athletes to work with the media, to have a positive working relationship with the media. So that's why a lot of times athletes shun the media.
Well, as a fellow introvert, I have my full sympathies with Naomi Osaka, and I hope she manages to pull through whatever challenges she's facing now. But Edgar, what advice would you have for other people who may not be athletes, but who also face similar weaknesses in their jobs? How would you advise them to work through these problems?
Well, all I can say is that life is a competition, and therefore your experience wherever you are is no different from an athlete. You are trying to perform your best and you are doing the best you can based on whatever limited or resources and things like that you have available to you. And to me, it's about being the best you can be. And sometimes we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we compare ourselves against people who may be better than us. But know that we are on a different journey. All of us are different in our own way. And therefore, when you're feeling that stress, I guess it's important to stay calm, composed, stay focused on your task, have an action plan so that you can follow through on what you've set out to do. Maintain that self-belief because that confidence is going to be important in helping you raise your potential in terms of what you can do, not what you cannot do. And know that in life there will be challenges, mistakes, setbacks, disappointments, and even temporary failure. And we need to be able to garner all those resources within us to deal with those. And lastly, but not forgetting, cohesion in terms of the people around us. In fact, new studies are beginning to show that when we seek support and also give social support to other people around us during high pressure situations, we actually help ourselves be less stressed. We help ourselves actually perform better and worry less. So the 5 C's again, I guess that would be my advice to everybody listening in.
Awesome. And you are a sport performance psychologist together with your team at Sport Psych Consulting. Do you also see cases who aren't athletes, maybe executives or even students?
Yes, I have a 10-year-old tennis player who told me today I feel calm and confident. I have a father who is really keen on helping their children do well, not just in sport, but in fact in life and in the academics. So I'm seeing an interesting mix of clients who actually want to utilize some of these principles. So again, I say to you, sport psychology isn't just for sport. Sport is just, to me, a metaphor for us to use so that we can understand the relationship of pressure and stress. But the strategies used by Olympic athletes can actually be learned by all of us.
Right, and we're glad to clear up that misconception that sports psychology is just for sportsmen and women. We have been speaking with Edgar Tham, who is the Chief Sport and Performance Psychologist at Sport Psych Consulting. He's in private practice. Do visit their website if you want to find out more information about the services they offer at sportpsychconsulting.com. That's SPORTPSYCH consulting.com. Edgar, pleasure having you today. Thank you for making time to speak with us on CNA 938.
Thank you very much.